Uh, Good evening to all those who are listening to my lessons. I would be quite happy if you can concentrate upon your textbook and read your books so that you'll be able to understand much better. Because in these lectures or in these talks, we are not writing the diagrams to the full extent, which would certainly would have helped you to learn better. Since our limitations are there, we will not be able to write the diagrams. Therefore, I request all of you to look into your textbooks and then look at the diagrams concerning the text or the talk what we are giving. Today, we will continue with the concept of organic evolution in this part 5. In today's talk, I will be trying to give my own understanding of Darwin's theory, what's called theory of natural selection. This theory is such that first we have to get convinced that there is a natural selection, and then we can tell others there is natural selection. So now I am convinced after reading many books that there is natural selection. Therefore, I will try to give you so that you also get convinced and don't believe in or believe in other theories. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So we will try to recollect what Charles Darwin said about the natural selection. He traveled quite a bit in England and other countries where the isolation, geographical isolation, that means the land or the island has been separated from the mainland for a long time, where people have not gone and settled. So that kind of virgin areas were there, and he went and visited those places. His main aim was to study the flora and fauna, but he got more and more interested in the animals, and then he specially watched the species there, and then he compared the species with some other parts where they have been said there been distance between hundreds and hundreds of miles. Same species, for example, only one type of fish would show different kind of similarities and different kinds of differences. So this is how he went on recording for years and years, and he came out to the conclusion. And that conclusion, in simple words we have to say, he concluded that the life forms, when I say life forms, that's what our textbook also gives, the life forms. Life forms indicate the various species of plants and animals that existed about 5,000 years ago and even now. And these are the life forms evolved from one population type to another with differences, similarities and variations. They showed differences, they showed similarities and differences. Before we go further, let me try to give you one simple example where the geographic distribution of human beings has given us some indication. Think of India, think of China, think of Burma, think of Japan, think of Hong Kong, think of Singapore. In this belt, you see the people have little yellowish color in their skin, and they are short, and their face is slightly different. They got broad chin. And then you think of going to Africa now. When you go to Africa, what kind of people you see? They are highly dark-skinned people, and their hair structure is very different, and their facial expression, facial formation is very different. That's one. See, the two comparison I have given you. Let us take up one more. If you go to country like USA, or you go to a country like UK. So you find where the cold countries were there the people have got a fair skin, and their personal characters are much different. And then you come down to India, Pakistan, and then Afghanistan, and these areas and the desert areas, they're slightly different. So the geographic distribution of the organisms played a role in bringing differences, similarities, and variations within the species, within the population. That's the concept of organic evolution. Now, we can ask, we will not go in detail about these things, already we have done that. We will ask a small question: how do we know? Are there any proofs for it? Are there any evidences for it? Yes, there are evidences recorded, well documented, and data collection has been done. And these important evidences points towards gradual and continuous variations in the populations. I will repeat again. The evidences indicate, what we will be discussing today will point towards gradual and continuous changes. Variations include differences, similarities, and like that. So gradually we could be able to trace it out. So the most important evidences we have is, one is called I will read them out. First, archaeological or fossil evidence, comparative anatomy, classification of organisms, embryological evidences, biogeography, what just now explained to you, genetics, and observable small scale changes. These are the evidences. I have written here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At least 7 quite observable evidences are there which scientists have studied and given us the data. We will not be able to discuss these things in detail, but I will be able to explain to you in short, in a very small introductory type, and then you have to expand it by reading textbook in your own classroom textbook, and the diagrams given will be able to help you out. Okay, we will take up the first one. Archaeological or fossil evidences. When you say fossil, by this time you know very clearly, these organisms lived millions of years ago and they are not seen today, they are extinct. Those species are non-existent. They are only available in the form of rock impressions called fossils. Millions of years ago, when the animals died and the plants died, and you know, when once a living being takes its birth, it has to die one day. And like that, millions of years ago, some organisms lived, they died. When they died, layers and layers and layers of earth has fallen down on them for millions of years, not 1 or 2 millions of years, and they decayed, and the decayed material got converted into, due to the pressure, in the form of what we call rock impressions or the fossils. So those, when you study these rock impressions, and we find these show pattern of biological gradual succession. Very clearly they indicate there is a pattern of change, gradual change. One best example for that is a fossil story of a bird called Archaeopteryx. That is neither a bird nor a reptile. Today we know reptiles are there, then we get higher level called the birds or aves, then comes the mammals. That is the whale path of evolution. So this particular Archaeopteryx a kind of a fossil animal indicated some characteristics of the reptilian characters and some characteristics of the birds. Birds' characteristics, they showed the wings. Reptilian characters, they showed about the heart. So that means a gradual succession has taken place from reptilian type to the avian or the birds type. Avian characters are more than the reptilian. So that is the first evidence. There are plenty of that in the history. Now the second comes the comparative anatomy. Anatomy refers to the internal parts. Internal parts like tissues, like bone tissue, maybe soft tissue like the muscle tissue. Bone tissue is a hard tissue and that is preserved in the earth even after death for a long time. So that will give a good example for that. When you compare the four limbs of the organisms, four limbs of animals like, for example, frog, lizard, bat, cat, whale and human being. They all belong to, frog belongs to amphibia, lizard belongs to reptilian, bat again belongs to the mammalia, cat, whale and these are all the humans. And even when you compare, take the four limbs has definitely long bone called humerus, then we got the radius and ulna, and then we got the phalanges here, then the fingers. So this type of things will be seen. Frog lives in water, it is an amphibian, still it has a same structure of the bones of the forelimb. Lizard is a reptilian, it has the same structure, but their function is different. Bat has the same structure of bones, but the function is different. Cat, whale lives in water, it has got the flippers. Flippers have the same type of bone arrangement than like a man or a frog. And humans, we have the same type of thing, though we come from different parts. And that kind of comparison is sometimes called homology. Homology, homo refers to similar, same structure, but functions differ. That's called homology. And then the second type also is known as analogy. Ana means up or different types. Now if you take the wings of the moth is a butterfly-like structure, moth, and then you take the birds. These two have the wings to fly. The moth's wings are very different. Moth is invertebrate, bird is a mammal, bird is a vertebrate. There are two different categories, invertebrate and vertebrata, but their organs do the same function. So in that condition is called functions remains the same, but different, structurally they are different, anatomically they are different, and such a thing is called the analogy, analogous thing. So this type of changes or gradual changes is said to be having two different things. One is called the divergent evolution. When you say divergent, same structures due to the variations and the geographic distribution and the conditions, they took a divergent view. The same hand of man, when we go backwards, it may be having a different function. So different functions are possible, and that's called divergent evolution. Same structure diverged into various types of functions. The second type is called the convergent evolution. Convergent refers to coming together. Though they may have a different types of living habitat and they come from different groups in animals, we are talking not in plants, animals, and they converge into some type of the functions, and that is called the convergent evolution. Diagrams are given in your textbook. Kindly go through that to understand it better. Now the third one comes from the classification. If you look at the classification of the organisms, we classify them based upon their structure of the body and how many cells it has, whether it is a vertebrate or invertebrate. In the vertebrate, again we will find out whether they live in water, they are aquatic, or they are land animals. Within that, again we find out whether they are reptiles, whether they are amphibians, or they are pieces of the fishes. And then when we come to land animals, we say some land animals are like aves, that is birds, and mammals, tigers, and other things. So classification indicates also a line of changes, gradual changes in their living and also in the pattern of activity. So that is another example we can say, that is species, families, groups and kingdom, they're all based upon similarities, differences and variations. Now coming to another important, very crucial thing called the embryological evidences. When we look at the embryological evidences, it's very, very interesting to think also. Please look into your textbooks. Yes, when the male and the female cells fertilize, they come together and exchange and make into one single cell. It's called fertilization, and that is called zygote. Zygote takes time to develop inside a shell. In case of chick, in case of hen, there will be egg, and inside the egg there will be changes inside going on. And in human beings, in the womb of the mother, the fertilized egg goes on changing. Like that, different types of organisms have different mechanisms. But when you look at the first formed zygote is single cell. You can't identify whether it is zygote of the frog or zygote of the man or zygote of crocodile. It is impossible to distinguish. And then slowly within that, the organisms start developing, and the embryos of the 1 month old or 30 days old embryos, when you put them together, they all look alike. They will show some fissures, that means some depressions, some elevations here and there, but you can't identify. If you go a little further, maybe 3 months, 4 months, slowly and gradually they develop themselves into their species or their kind. And the embryological evidences clearly indicate there is a common ancestral history. Only at this time, the famous catching words came up called ontogeny repeats phylogeny. That means ontogeny refers to an individual's life cycle, tries to recapitulate what happened in their progeny years ago, from simple type to they, depending upon the time and the variation in the environment, they start changing into a different form. We will not go again to those details, but just remember, embryological evidences gives a very important indication. When the fertilized egg develops into an adult, they will have a large number of changes. These changes at certain stage will look alike. They all look alike. There will be no difference. They may also show a kind of a slits for respiration in the form of gills, like that, and slowly they develop into different organisms. And then comes another one I told you, biogeography. That means biogeographical evidences, that is, species are distributed in different but similar environments. Different but similar environments. I told you, I gave the example of the human beings. We are isolated on the earth and we have different environment, different climatic changes, different geographical conditions, and then species will show gradual and continuous variations in them. When you compare African human with an Indian human or with a Japanese human being or a Chinese human being, you clearly see the variations, differences, but similarities in everything. They have two legs, we have two legs. They have two hands, we have two hands, two eyes, one brain, except on the abnormalities, the same thing. So geographic distribution also points out towards the differences and similarities came gradually from one type to another type. And then comes the evidences from the genetics. Genetic evidence very clearly indicate every organism has DNA, and that DNA has sequences which are common to all. If you remember your own genetics classes, you remember adenine, cytosine, guanine, and then thymine are the bases. So these, when they organize themselves into different forms due to various reasons, they develop into different structures, maybe different tissues, maybe different organs, and ultimately different organisms. But not 1 year, millions and millions of years ago, these changes are happening. And lastly, we come to the observable small-scale changes that we can see today. Even now we can see that they are observable. In nature we can see the differences. Right from my own eyes I have seen, when I was a young man of about 10 years or 12 years person, we were getting mangoes of one kind. And today we see the mangoes of a different variety. And today we can find out different things in the nature like that. Similarly, you can think of dogs. Breeding takes place. When breeding takes place, one dog, a German dog breeds with an Indian dog, you get a different species. So in the nature, these things were happening millions of years ago, and that has produced different species, families, etc. In the lab, we do experiments and we get genetically different organisms, and also we find domesticated organisms, especially in selective breeding. If you want a particular type of a dog, you can think of breeding the dog with something else. And it has started now in the human beings. It is very dangerous, the selective breeding, totally dangerous thing. But however, it is possible that these are the evidences that clearly indicate that the one population existing in one geographical area might have changed its form and evolved into another form due to the adaptive selections because of the various forces acting upon in the environment. So with this we will stop here. I'll request you to kindly read your textbook and then look at the diagrams given for archaeological evidences, comparative evidences, embryological evidences, and these examples and also the diagrams are given. I will not be able to write those diagrams here. Therefore, I request you to kindly do that. I will stop here. Again, concluding saying that Charles Darwin's natural selection theory on organic evolution is well accepted today over the other theory called the special theory of creation. It is only limited to some people. Thank you all.